Chapter 5 Road of Broken Signs. We left Dawnspear beneath a sky too clear to be honest. The 7 spires of the radiant tribunal burned behind us, their eternal flames unmoved by wind or weather, as if the world itself had agreed to make room for them. From a distance, they looked like purity-made architecture. 7 white spears of light pinned into the earth to keep it from shifting. I had spent most of my life believing that sight meant safety, that if the spires still burned, the world was still held together, that whatever sickness lived in the hearts of men could not crawl past those flames. That belief followed me out of the city like a shadow trying to pretend it was still part of my body. I did not look back until the gates were already shrinking behind us, the white marble walls receding into something smaller, less absolute than they had ever seemed before. A child part of me insisted distance was to blame. Distance always makes things look less holy, but another part of me, newer, sharper, unwelcome, whispered that certainty is just a kind of proximity. Step far enough away and you see what the thing actually is. I told myself it was distance doing that. I didn't believe it. The road east toward Emberfall had once been a pilgrimage path, long before it became an artery of tribunal authority. I knew every measure of it from memory, how many stones between markers, where the road curved around a spring so old its water tasted faintly of silver, which shrines were placed to catch the first light of dawn, so travelers could kneel and begin the day with warmed hands and a warmed soul. Novices walked this road barefoot as part of their final trial, carrying nothing but a candle and their oath. I had walked it that way once, feet bleeding through the thin skin of devotion, heart light with certainty. Back then, pain felt like proof. The harder the road, the truer the promise at the end. Back then, I believed the light watched every step and corrected misplacement before it could become error. Now the road felt altered, not broken, not ruined. Edited, the first signpost leaned subtly off its axis. The carved sunburst at its crown was worn thin in a way time alone could not explain. It looked worried at, rather than weathered, like a word rubbed down by too many revisions, smoothed until it could mean anything. The blessing beneath, "May the light guide you true," had lost its warmth. I felt it as we passed, not pain, not cold, but a kind of polite emptiness. That emptiness unsettled me more than cracks would have. Cracks are honest. Damage admits its own existence. This felt like someone had taken a chisel to meaning. The road had always been a promise. Follow the stones, trust the markers, walk where others have walked, and the light will keep you from losing yourself. That was what they taught us. It was recited in the novices' hall, written above doorways, sung in the closing hymn after evening drills. When your body ached and your mind wanted to wander, you repeated the phrase like a charm. It was meant to stitch you back into alignment. But as we rode, I found myself watching the spaces between the markers more than the stones themselves. The places where guidance ended and choice began. I had never paid attention to those gaps before. Why would I? The light filled them, or so I believed. Now I wondered how often I had mistaken familiarity for truth. If a lie is repeated long enough, sung in hymns, carved into stone, enforced by oath, does it stop feeling like a lie? Or does it simply become invisible? Marin rode slightly behind me, her posture rigid in a way that told me she felt it too. She had grown up inside the tribunal, as I had, trained, refined, polished, until doubt became reflexively painful. Yet even now, she watched the land more than the road, her eyes moving in quick, precise sweeps. Sometimes her gaze drifted to her left gauntlet, the broken one, cracked across the knuckles like a story she refused to finish. The tribunal had offered her replacements more than once. She always refused. Once, as novices, I asked her why. She looked at me like the question was the most dangerous thing I'd ever said, and then she answered, in a voice too quiet to be overheard, because the crack reminds me I'm not forged. I'm not a tool. I'm a person. At the time, I thought it was poetry, a flourish. Merrin was always like that, sharp, infuriatingly thoughtful. Now I wondered if she'd been warning me all along, and I'd been too obedient to hear it. We were not alone for long. The arrow struck the dirt a pace ahead of my horse's hooves, driving deep enough that the shaft shuddered. I reined in hard, heart already racing, hand closing around my sword hilt as 1,000 drills snapped into place. The sensation was familiar, clean, disciplined, reassuring. My body knew what to do, even when my mind didn't. Easy. A voice called from the trees. If I meant to kill you, that would have been closer. Merrin had her blade half drawn. I raised a hand, signaling restraint, though every instinct screamed threat. "Show yourself," I said. Leaves parted, and a man stepped into view, bull unstrung, hood thrown back, movements deliberate. He stood like someone who had learned the exact distance between caution and confidence the hard way. His eyes missed nothing, not our armor, not our weapons, not the way my horse's ears pinned back at his scent. Thalen Reedwind. I recognized him instantly. Guides like him earned reputations whether they wanted them or not. Tribunal patrols spoke his name with irritation and reluctant respect. He had escorted pilgrims through lands we deemed unpredictable and returned alone when others did not. "Radiant Tribunal," he said mildly, eyes flicking to our armor. "Didn't expect to see you this far out without a procession." "We didn't come to be seen," Merrin replied. Thalen's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "That's usually when the light starts asking uncomfortable questions." "You loosed an arrow at a paladin," I said. "That's a bold choice." "It was a warning," he replied. "This stretch of road isn't safe anymore, and holy armor draws the wrong kind of attention." "What kind?" I asked. He met my eyes directly. "The kind that listens when gods speak wrong. When gods speak wrong." The phrase lodged in my chest like a splinter. We were trained to believe divine speech was definitionally correct. Commands could be harsh, difficult, even cruel by mortal reckoning, but never wrong. Wrong was for mortals, for fallible minds and incomplete perspectives. Yet Thalen said it like a fact, not a provocation, like someone describing a broken bridge or poisoned water. And the unsettling part was this: if divine commands could be wrong, then obedience stopped being a virtue on its own. It became a test, and tests imply the possibility of failure. "You've seen it," I said. He nodded once. "Tracked it, and I've been paid, officially, to guide you." He produced a sealed writ. "Tribunal authority, genuine, Malric's seal." The parchment smelled faintly of the tribunal's ink. Iron gall, citrus oil, and something else the scribes added so forgeries could be identified by scent alone. I'd always admired that detail. It was clever. practical, proof that the tribunal valued truth. Now it felt like a joke. A familiar pressure settled behind my eyes, the same sensation I'd felt in the sanctum before Solon's voice fractured, the sense of being looked at from somewhere impossibly far away. I did not believe in coincidence anymore. Why accept? I asked. Thalen hesitated, just long enough to show it mattered. I owe Emberfall, he said. He didn't elaborate. People who live on the road learn what stories get you killed. They keep their debts close, and their reasons closer. Marin's gaze sharpened. You expect us to trust you? Thalen shrugged. Trust is expensive. I'm offering usefulness. If you want to die righteous, keep walking without me. His bluntness was almost refreshing. We rode on together after that, the silence between us tight with unspoken truths. As the sun climbed, the land grew worse. Shrines stood intact but hollow, their consecrations thin and brittle. Candles burned without warmth, flames that looked correct but felt like imitation. The air around them carried none of that gentle comfort I associated with prayer, only heat and smoke. A prayer stone, older than the tribunal itself, had split clean in two, its fracture glowing faintly with residue that made my skin crawl. The glow wasn't steady. It pulsed, as if remembering a heartbeat. Thalen dismounted often, kneeling to examine scorched earth and warped stone. He didn't touch anything bare-handed. He used a thin blade to lift flakes of ash, a small lens to study residue, a thread of silver wire to test the air. Divine residue, he muttered. Layered, like two commands passed through the same channel and fought on the way out. That shouldn't be possible, I said automatically, doctrine rising to meet discomfort. The words sounded like a child repeating a lesson to keep the dark away. Thalen didn't look up. Lots of things shouldn't be possible. Doesn't stop them. Marin watched him work, expression guarded. You study this often. Often enough, Thalen replied. When the roads started changing, I started listening to what the land was saying instead of what the priests told me it meant. That landed hard. Listening to the land was old faith, pre-tribunal faith, the kind the tribunal called uncultivated at best and heretical at worst. By midday, the forest fell unnaturally silent. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed reluctant to move. The silence was not peaceful. It was held like a room where a child has been scolded and no one wants to breathe too loudly. I tried to pray, the words stuck in my throat like damp parchment. The connection felt muffled, not absent but constrained, as though something listened too closely. Not Solon, not the bright presence I'd known my whole life. Something else. I didn't speak the prayer aloud. I didn't dare. It felt like opening a door I could not close. And then it attacked. It burst from the undergrowth with a sound like stone tearing. At first, I thought it was a guardian stag, one of the consecrated beasts bound to pilgrimage roads, long before the tribunal formalized such things. Its antlers were etched with sigils of protection, blessings meant to interpose themselves between traveler and threat. Had been. Now those sigils burned beneath its flesh, warped and overlapping, carving light into meat. Its hide steamed as if something inside it was too hot for the world. Its eyes glowed with fractured radiance, and when it screamed, the sound bypassed my ears entirely and struck inside my skull. I tasted copper. My vision flickered at the edges. "Hold!" I shouted. "Do not invoke." Too late. Training overrode caution. My hand was already at my holy symbol, my mouth already forming Solon's name. I didn't choose it. It happened the way a flinch happens, the way a trained response happens. I raised my symbol, calling Solon's name. The creature shrieked, not in rage, but agony. The healing invocation struck it like poison. Light splintered across its body in violent arcs, carving hot lines through the air. The stag staggered as if I'd struck it with a blade, crashing into a tree hard enough to crack bark. Leaves shivered down like frightened birds. For a heartbeat, everything in me went cold. The light had never hurt the innocent through me before. That truth landed heavier than the creature's scream. I had healed plague victims, soothed dying soldiers, steadied children trembling with fever. Never once had the light recoiled from compassion. So if it burned now, either the world had changed, or the voice I answered was no longer what I believed it to be. And if I continued to channel without understanding, which was true, then I wasn't serving justice. I was gambling lives on faith alone. That realization did not weaken me. It terrified me. And then, slowly, it steadied me. "What did you do?" Mayorin shouted, already moving, shield raised. "I tried to soothe it." The words came out harsh, panicked, defensive. "Stop channeling," Thalen yelled. "You're destabilizing it." The stag lunged, hooves tearing up soil, antlers lowered. The sigils along its rack flared, then stuttered, flickering like broken lanterns. It was trying to do what it had been made to do, defend the road, but it didn't know what defend meant anymore. I drew my blade instead. Steel felt real, solid, honest. I attempted to call a smite, not with prayer, not with surrender, but with intent. The power came fractured, 3 partial bursts instead of one clean strike. One fizzled against my blade like wet fire. One scorched the ground in a jagged line that made the grass curl and die. The third struck true, catching the stag's shoulder and knocking it sideways. It collapsed, twitching. Sigils burned themselves out beneath its hide like veins of light trying to find a path. Silence fell, only the creature's ragged breaths and the thud of my heart. I stood shaking. "That wasn't evil," I whispered, because I needed someone else to say it to. Needed the world to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. "No," Thalen said grimly. "It was faithful. And something broke it." I took a step forward without thinking. "Don't touch it," he snapped. The corpse convulsed, light bleeding from ruptured sigils and thin threads. Gold, then pale, then nothing. The air around it tightened, prickling along my skin, and then fire cut through the clearing. Lysa arrived in a flare of controlled flame. She vaulted over a fallen log, hands glowing, eyes taking in the scene in a single heartbeat. She moved like someone who had learned to act first and ask questions later, like someone who had seen what hesitation costs. "Step back," she said, "all of you." She didn't use prayer, didn't speak a divine name. She shaped fire like a craftsman shapes steel, careful, precise. Her flame licked along the creature's sigils, not burning flesh, but cauterizing the corrupted resonance. The threads of light snapped and went still, and the air eased. When she looked up and saw me, she froze. "You, Lysa," I said, stunned. "What are you doing here?" For a moment she looked like she might turn and run, then her shoulders squared. "Running messages," she said quietly. "Avoiding the tribunal." That alone would have been scandalous a year ago. Now it felt like survival. Her gaze swept the clearing, lingering on my cracked symbol, on the staggered scorch marks, on the corpse that looked like a prayer turned inside out. "It's spreading," she said, not a question. Yes, Thalen replied. And Emberfall isn't the source. It's the fault line, she finished, voice low. Thalen crouched near the stag, using a knife tip to lift a strip of scorched hide without touching it. Beneath, the old protection sigils were visible, clean, elegant, patient. Layered over them were newer markings, etched with haste, overlapping and conflicting. Overlapping commands. He muttered, Mini son, Goer, Spern, Gordi, Weni, Sumses, Purjan, one just bum screams obey. That shouldn't coexist, Marin said, face pale. More, which means whoever sent them didn't care. Thalen said. I stared at the corpse. Guard, purge. The tribunal would call that clarity. 3 words, simple, uncomplicated. Except the world doesn't live in single words. People don't fit inside them. Neither do I. We moved quickly after that because something in the clearing felt like a held breath. The kind of stillness that happens right before teeth sink into flesh. Thalen led us off the main road, pushing into uneven ground where roots caught at boots and ferns brushed against armor. He chose the direction like he could feel danger, the way a man feels weather change in his joints. Too late. The ground shifted, not collapsed, but turned, like something waking beneath it. I felt it in my feet first, the subtle roll of earth. The wrongness of a surface that should be solid, deciding it isn't. Spread out, Thalen hissed. The earth erupted. A pilgrim construct tore free from the soil, stone and sanctified wood, its limbs carved with old, protective runes, now fractured and bleeding light. I recognized the design instantly, one of the ancient road-wardens built to interpose itself between pilgrim and harm. The tribunal still used the blueprints, though they claimed the originals were too crude to be reliable. Crude. The construct's chest bore a single, violently glowing command sigil, carved deep and raw like a wound. Its head snapped toward us, and it spoke, not aloud, inside my skull. Obey. The word slammed into me with divine authority behind it. My knees buckled. I dropped to one knee, gasping, hands clutching my helm, as pain lanced behind my eyes. Marin cried out beside me. Thalen staggered. Lysa's flame flared wildly, then sputtered, as if the air itself resisted her. Kneeling would have been easier. Submission would have been relief. I had been trained for this moment my entire life, and that was when I understood the true danger. Not that the command existed, but that I was built to answer it without thinking. If something could wear Solin's authority and hijack my obedience, then my oath was no longer a safeguard. It was a weapon waiting to be turned, and I would not be wielded again, not by gods, not by lies. No prayers, I rasped, forcing the words through clenched teeth. No invocations. It felt like heresy. It felt like blasphemy. It also felt like survival. Lysa screamed, not in pain but fury, and hurled fire that struck the construct's chest. The flames skittered off its surface, distorted by the glowing sigil. The air warped around it like heat over forged stone. It's anchored, Thalen shouted. The command's binding it. The construct lunged with horrifying speed for something so heavy, slamming a stone fist into the ground. Dirt and splinters of root exploded outward. I rolled, barely avoiding the impact, my armor scraping bark as I hit a tree. Marin moved like she was born in battle. Shield up, blade angled. She caught the next blow with her shield, but the impact drove her backward with a grunt. Her boots furrowed trenches in the soil. Lysa, she shouted. Can you destabilize it? I'm trying. Lysa's voice cracked with strain. Her fire burned brighter, turning whiter, less like flame, and more like will made visible. Whatever's powering it, obey. The command surged again, not targeted, broadcast. The kind of thing meant to force crowds to kneel. My body wanted to comply. Muscles trembled with the urge to lower my head, to surrender thought, to let something else decide. I saw myself in that instant as the tribunal wanted me, a perfect instrument, a blade that never questions the hand, and something in me snapped. Not in rage, but refusal. No, I said, not shouted, chosen. I forced myself upright and drove my blade into the glowing sigil. The sword screamed, not in triumph but strain. I felt the resistance in my bones, like trying to cut through a law written into reality. The sigil fractured, hairline cracks spidering across the glowing mark, but it did not break. The construct's head jerked toward me as if offended. Of course it was offended. Obedience hates resistance because resistance reveals what obedience is. It swung a massive arm. Marin lunged between us, taking the blow on her shield. The metal shrieked. Her cracked gauntlet flashed as she braced, and for a heartbeat, I thought her arm would snap. She held. I caught her eye. Something passed between us. Fear, yes, but also the quiet understanding that we were crossing a line we couldn't uncross. Thalen fired 2 arrows in rapid succession. Each was tipped with a small glass vial that shattered on impact, releasing a shimmer of disruptor dust. The arrows struck the construct's shoulder joint and hip. Stone cracked. The creature staggered a fraction. "Again!" Thalen shouted. "Hit the core! Always the core!" Lysa's fire surged, wrapping around the sigil, not burning, but interrupting. I felt it like static in my teeth, the resonance destabilizing. The construct raised both arms. Obey, kneel, submit. The words were not just commands. They were an identity forced into me, a demand that my will be replaced. I struck again. Not with prayer, with judgment. Steel met glowing sigil. The cracks deepened. Lysa screamed as she pushed more power into her flame. Sweat poured down her temples. Her hands trembled with strain, but her eyes were locked on the sigil like she could see the pattern beneath it. Thalen's final arrow flew. Time slowed. The arrow struck dead center. The sigil shattered. The command broke. It wasn't an explosion. It was a silence so sudden it felt like falling into a void. The construct froze mid-motion, then collapsed inward, grinding itself to rubble as the contradictions holding it together finally won. Stone ground against stone. Dust rose. The air tasted of ash and something faintly sweet, like burned incense. Silence, real silence. I sank to my knees, chest heaving. My holy symbol lay cracked against my breastplate, a hairline fracture running through Solan's sigil. I stared at it, numb. I expected panic, grief, the need to fix it. Instead, I felt clarity. The light had not abandoned me. It had withdrawn, as if waiting to see what I would do without it. That frightened me less than it should have, because somewhere between the shattered sigil and my cracked symbol, I understood something the tribunal never taught us. Faith was never meant to replace judgment. It was meant to inform it. And if the gods demanded obedience without conscience, then they were no longer asking for faith. They were asking for surrender. I would not give it. Marin knelt beside me, hands glowing faintly as she tried to call healing. Then she stopped. Her glow faded like a candle snuffed. "I can't heal this," she whispered. "The light won't answer," Lysa said softly, staring at her own hands as if they'd betrayed her. "Not for this." Thalen stood over the rubble, face unreadable. "That settles it," he said. "This isn't local. Someone's rewriting commands at the source." "And Emberfall?" I asked, already knowing. "If this is happening here," he said, "then whatever's bound there is holding the fault together by will alone." Oathbound, the word struck me like a bell. I thought of the pressure behind my eyes, the sense of being watched, of something straining against restraint whenever the divine stream flickered. I did not say it aloud, but the thought formed anyway. Something is trapped. Night fell with the kind of heaviness that made every shadow feel crowded. We made camp without fire. No one argued. Fire felt too much like a beacon, too much like a prayer. We ate cold rations in silence. The forest remained unnaturally quiet, as if the world itself listened for the next command. When we finally settled into watch rotations, I took first watch with Marin. She sat beside me, back against a tree, sword across her lap. The broken gauntlet gleamed faintly in the moonlight, its crack a white line across the metal. For a long time, she didn't speak. Then, quietly, as if confessing into the darkness where it couldn't be carried back to Dawnspear, she said, "I once obeyed a command that contradicted my oath." I turned toward her slowly. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on the tree line as if expecting something to step out and judge her. "People died," she said, "not because I wanted them to, not because I hated them, because I believed obedience was righteousness." Her throat bobbed as she swallowed, and when I realized what I'd done, I prayed until my voice gave out. I begged the light to tell me it wasn't real, to tell me I'd misunderstood, to punish me, even. She finally looked at me, eyes bright in the dark, and there was nothing, she whispered. No warmth, no rebuke, no comfort. I felt the cold truth of it settle into my ribs. "I think the silence was the punishment," she said. "No," I said quietly. She blinked. "What?" I stared into the dark, beyond the trees, feeling the weight of the road ahead, of Emberfall, of the Oracle, who had seen me kneel and me kill. "I think the silence was freedom," I said, "and they taught us to fear it." Marin's breath hitched. Thalen, half asleep nearby, shifted slightly as if the words disturbed him. Lysa lay with her cloak pulled up, eyes open, staring at nothing. The road ahead lay hidden in darkness, and for the first time since taking my oath, that did not feel like failure. It felt like honesty. I did not know what waited in Emberfall. I did not know which god still spoke freely, or whether Solan's silence was guilt, imprisonment, or something worse. I did not know whether the tribunal had sent Thalen to help us, or to measure how badly I was breaking. But I knew this. I would not obey a command simply because it was divine. I would weigh it. I would question it, and if it demanded the death of the innocent, I would stand against it, no matter the cost. That was no longer a thought. It was a vow, not carved into marble, not overseen by justicars, not enforced by fear. My vow. The tribunal had trained me to be a blade, but blades are tools. They exist for someone else's hand. I chose to be something else. A paladin who chose, and somewhere in that chosen silence, thin as a thread, almost imagined, I felt a presence stir, vast and restrained, like a star trying to breathe beneath stone. Not a voice, not yet, just the faintest sense of approval, as if something ancient had been waiting for exactly this, the moment obedience broke and judgment began.